Y'all come on. We do have, this is a picture of kind of the upstairs, designed for our folks that are maybe wheelchair bound. This building does not have a lift in it. So be careful, come on up. If you'll look, there's pictures on your left. Mr. Wilson, the same man that's done all those pictures down there, it was. Up here on this landing, I'll wait till some of you get up here, and maybe y'all can move on around up there. Actually, we've had a baseball team at this post for 77 years. And this is a 1936 ball team. This team right here, playing at Duncan Park, 22,000 people, the largest crowd in the state of South Carolina until they built William Bryce Stadium. Beat San Diego. That's the Spartanburg boys and the San Diego boys. Beat them 3 out of 5 games to win. And a fellow by the name of Severn Wright pitched a no-hitter in the 5th game to beat them. This is the uniform that they wore. 1936 national champions. You'll notice it's wool. And they play in July here. It had to be kind of tough. Now this is this year's uniform. This is the only national champion trophy in the state of South Carolina. Last year we thought possibly Gaffney might do it. They came in 5th in the national. But we won 8 state championships. This particular team has won 8 state championships down through the years. We like to show that first. Now there's this guy here is kind of our guard. And normally he has a 45 listed in there. We've taken it out for protection. These pictures here are all our past commanders. And if you're from Spartanburg, one of the first one was Jesse Bobo. Probate Judge Bobo. And then some of the others. This fella here, I just got this picture not too long ago. He's been deceased for a while. He was a commander in 39. His name was Clarence Chester Brown. His son was Chester Brown, a lawyer here in town, and I knew him. And I called him and told him, I said, I got the frame, but no picture. And he brought this picture over, and I swear he died. Chester died 2 weeks later. And he was in picture health when I talked to him. This man here just passed away. We buried him. He's one of the Marines on the Chosin Reservoir. He was one of the guys that said, hey, I'm tired of killing them people over there. You know this fellow, you met him downstairs. That's Jesse Campbell. He was, like I said, 33 years. He was the commander, the finance officer and athletic officer. This man, Carl Littlejohn, was the adjutant for about 40 years. Douglas Abercrombie. Larry Mixon will be here in the morning. This fellow, Jimmy Deal, was our commander. Super nice guy. Because if it was in the book, it was good. If it wasn't in the book, don't talk to him about it. Nancy Walsh and Cliff Patrick and some of the... In fact, that's me right there. Anyway, y'all come on in. This, by the way, is an original Christie. There's not many of those around. I don't know if you remember. How many of you can tell me who Francis Marion was and what he did?
Guerrilla warfare.
And when?
Revolutionary War.
I never did get that.
I want to tell you, I had a picture of him sitting on a horse in the swamp, and I had it at the fair last year, and I was asking the teachers, I said, I want to give each one of your kids a little flag. I said, but you got to answer a couple of questions, and one of them is, can you tell me who this great American Revolutionary War soldier is sitting on this horse in the swamp? From South Carolina, the only general from South Carolina that was in the Revolutionary War. I got George Washington, Andrew Jackson, you name it. 2 said Francis Marion. Now, those two teachers, by the way, went to Francis Marion University. That's how they knew. That sounds kind of funny. So I asked him, I said, I got a picture here of a man with a corncob pipe, got 5 stars, kicked the Japanese out of the Philippines. He was fired by, and he kicked the North Koreans out of North Korea. And I said, he was fired by Harry Truman. Who is he? 2 teachers told me Douglas MacArthur. Now, here's the catch. I said, okay, I want these kids to have, how many stars in the American flag?
50? 50.
Half those school teachers couldn't tell me there was 50 stars in the American flag. That's pitiful. Y'all come on in. I had to tell you that. We'll start this corner.
Good time.
Hey,
How many
Hey.
people are aware of what the Masons have in Masonry? They have the Shriners. The Shriners are kind of the playboys of Masonry. Well, the Voltaire is kind of the playboys of the Legion. Now, I don't read French too well. Anybody here read French? It says, a society of 40 men or 8 horses. They rode in boxcars, they call themselves the 40 and 8. They rode in boxcars in France. Well, they were kind of funny. You see this picture here, that's all them, they're all men. They're dressed up in drag before they knew what drag was. And this right here, they're bringing some in to the downstairs, and a big sign says no smoking. Every one of them got a cigar in his hand. But anybody would dress up this way had to be kind of a comical fellow. Now, World War II came along, and this is our World War II officer's uniform called the pinks and greens. Well, when that war was over, none of these guys rode in the French boxcars. They rode in half-tracks and other things, the transportation. So this post here did not allow them in the Voltaire, which meant the Voltaire became as everybody died out, it died out as well. Now, Rock Hill post down there allowed their World War II veterans, they have a very strong Voltaire. Different things in here that you might see. Some of this is officers of the 118th Regiment, 1922. That don't sound like anything to anybody, but that's South Carolina National Guard from Spartanburg. Just different things around. That was the sharpshooters from Spartanburg. That was a ship that W.R. Robinson, that was at the when they did the bomb test in that. Where did they do the bomb test? Is it Kenya? Castle. There's Marshall Islands. I forget the name of the island. I heard it before. But anyway, that was one of the ships there, and that kid was on. We have a book here that shows a World War II veterans from Spartanburg coming back home. And it's very interesting. I think I mentioned to some of you about the World War II man from Landrum that won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Here's his picture here showing him coming home. If you look right here, there's my uncle's picture. I just happened to notice it when we were looking through this book. He came home in 1946 from Japan. In fact, anybody been inside an American tank? Anybody ever been in an American tank? Let me show you why they wear headgear like this with earplugs and everything else. That's the way it sounds all the time. No matter what gear it's in or anything else, you've got to overcome that noise. They talk with headphones and things like this. By the way, this is an A-1 Abrams tank. Been in 180 battles and never been defeated. That's a pretty good record. This is a Maximum machine gun. Now, the fellow that had this in his barn for 40 years, Gary Evans Foster evidently brought this. This is one of the guns he relieved the Germans of. This changed the warfare of World War I. Anybody know what the Patriot missile system is today? That's our protection, really. I mean, it don't matter. A missile can be on the horizon, it will fire and hit it. This gun is kind of the Patriot missile of World War I. Guys used to line up and walk across the field and attack. Not with that gun on the field, they wouldn't. It'd mow them down like wheat. So it changed warfare. It put people in trenches, and it took many, many years for them to figure out how to get out of those trenches and do warfare. Different people here. You really can't see this too well at night because it's not that well lit. In the daytime, it shows up pretty good. Different things. The Citadel uniform. Picture over there signed to us by Harry Truman. Stars and Stripes. This is a complete book of World War I issue Stars and Stripes. And we don't turn these pages too often because they're very brittle. But it's the only one we know of in existence. That came out in on a weekly thing during World War I. Some other things here. We got a guy that does this down in New Orleans, and he brings it. He's got a sister that lives in Spartanburg, and he brings those things down and gives them to us. We put them up. This lady here, she's real cool. She was in the Army, she was in the Navy in World War II. This is her picture here. And I asked her, I said, Ms. Mary, I said, what did you do in World War II? She said, I chased Navy aviators all over Pensacola. I said, you did? She was a real trip now. I said, yeah, and I said, and I caught the curator kissing you on the cheek fixing this hat. And she'd met Ed downstairs, and she said, that's her there. She said, you get that good-looking thing up here. Said, I'm the real thing. she had a good bit of fun with that. But hers was the first uniform we brought in here. This all came in one man's ditty bag, and I'm going to show you this for one reason. It's got a lot of things that he's picked up in France in World War I, had his insurance. His life was worth $5,000, by the way. That's a lot of money back in World War I. He's got his World War I, Jesse Seth Davis is his name, from Landrum, and that's his induction where he signed up for World War I. This is the one where he registered for World War II. And this yellow ticket here is where he was in this post 28 in 1936. That was his membership card. That's the year we won the national championship. And you got to understand some things here that we purchased, but this picture is kind of odd. It shows a World War I soldier going off to war, and he says, not this trip, old pal. And he comes back 3 years later. See, it's 3 years later there, and it says, surprise party, old pal was an old gal, and they have puppies. We think that's funny. Now, the man that has drawn all those pictures and painted all those pictures you've seen down the hall, his name is Robert Wilson. He flew this airplane in World War II. He flew these gliders into Normandy and in a place later on called Market Garden. And he was shot at, his ship was shot with a lot of holes and whatnot. He had to fly along just above the ground, like at 120 miles an hour. That's super slow for an airplane. And I mean, everybody was pecking at him. He received the Silver Star, and he just got it 62 years later, about 5 years ago. We can go on. There's some latest things. We've got this latest hat and bag and boots, and we got a picture of her sitting on a truck in Guadalcanal in 1945. But we loaned it to the museum in Columbia because they were featuring her as one of South Carolina's finest warriors of World War II. Yeah, this is always kind of interesting here. I had a bunch of Wofford College ROTC unit people in here, and they were looking at this. Have you ever heard of Flounders Field, where the poppies grow? You ever see the ladies of the American Legion distributing poppies, you know, and little red things. And all that money goes to the Veterans Home in Anderson. We did quite a bit of that, our ladies do. Well, this right here is called Flounders Field. And if you'll notice, every one of those crosses represent a human being that was 18, 19, 20, 30, in that age bracket, that died so we would be free. I caught a guy in here, now they were getting an hour over at Washington, they were getting an hour to go through here, and he was standing here texting. And I asked him a question, I said, and by the way, I said, here's a PW right here, prisoner of war. And if you'll notice the guy with the rifle there, you're going to have to pay attention on that thing because it's not just going to jump out at you. Anyway, I said, can you tell me who's digging all them holes? And of course, he kind of stuck that thing in his pocket, and he said, no. I said, well, if you follow along, I was telling you about this, those guys all died to give you the right to stand around and play with that thing in your pocket. Boy, he didn't mess with it no more. But if you think about this, you look at all those graves there. Those are all Americans. This is in Belgium, and they all died to make us, for one reason, for this country to be free. And so consequently, we got a lot of people that we really need to honor these guys, you know. And that's in Belgium, and most of them are still there. We have different kind of weapons here. Now, by the way, fellas, all these weapons are deactivated. Or they can't be picked up and sold because they've got ID numbers on them, and they're also, they won't fire weapons. So, but there's a German Mauser, there's a German Luger in that right there. That's probably one of the more interesting pieces in here. This particular weapon is probably one of the finest machined weapons in the world. I mean, it's machined to an nth degree. Two things happen. You drop it in the mud, it won't fire. You drop it in water, it won't fire. It's so machined so well. It's a wonderful weapon if it's kept clean. And if you'll notice, Jesse, I just hate it to be interrupted when I'm talking.
Well, I'm trying to butt in.
Anyway, if you'll notice, this weapon is completely concealed. And it's for the same reason I just told you. It's very dust and things like that cause it to be, but it's a highly prized weapon from World War II. By the way, can anybody tell me what this is?
Okay. Is that for the officer to take back?
Yes. This came off of one of the islands that our Marines took, and each one of them stayed there. It's amazing. I don't like to even look at that thing much. We have a 45 here too. Now, this is a little different weapon. This weapon is kind of loose. It's the kind of weapon that, well, you gotta. But the idea is, you can throw this thing in the mud and it'll still fire. It was carried in World War I by Richard Harris's father. And so I was at Richard Harris's house about 3 years ago, or 4 years ago now, and I told him, I said, man, our museum's going to, he had this in a, I said, our museum would love to have that 45. He said, Jim, he said, my grandson's going to take it to Iraq with him. His daddy wore it in World War I, he wore it in World War II, and his son wore it in Iraq. Wow. And as soon as he got back, he said, we retired it, and he brought it up here. So that gun has a lot of sentimental values to a lot of people, you know. Now, you say, how can that happen? Well, Richard Harris says it protected him for 4 years, you know. I mean, he brought him home. And by the way, that's the declaration that they signed on the ship. The Japanese signed to surrender. Normally we have this playing music. This, by the way, did anybody see that communication device back there?
Yeah, I was showing my daughter that.
A lot of people didn't realize what that was.
I told her that's how they use stuff like we have our cell phone.
That was an ancient man-made communication device known as a typewriter. We pulled it up. World War II's leading fighter pilot, Captain Foch, signed this book for us years ago. There's a brown dagger right there. Now, one of those, this saber is not a replica. That brown dagger is not a replica. Some of the SS ones back there are. But that dagger, anybody tell me who the SA in World War II were? Does anybody know?
SA?
SA. This was the stormtroopers that put Hitler in power in 1932, 33, 34, 35. And he finally became scared of them. And so in 1939, it's known as the Night of the Long Knives, he had his SS men and Hitler himself killed they had all the officers of this outfit on a retreat, and they went in there that night and killed them all because he was scared of them overthrowing him. But that is an SA dagger right there, and that's kind of unique to have one, really, because they didn't make them after 1939. This fellow here, Dan Arrowwood, this is a World War II pilot. He's one of our guys here. He and his wife come to all the dances. This man, Frank Beer, is a Chief Navy in the Navy. Jesse Campbell wore a uniform similar to this, but he was also a chief in the Navy. But this guy said if he'd have looked that good in that uniform, he'd have stayed in the damn Navy. This is my grandson's uniform right here. He can't wear it anymore, and he also made sergeant, and I've got the stripes down there, but in order to put those stripes on, I got to take all these buttons, all this stuff off, and turn this thing inside out, and sew them stripes on it. I just hadn't had time to do it. Any Marine officer, any Marine non-commissioned officer that has a red stripe, that's once they go to Sergeant Plus, they put the red stripe on, that's a sailor. This uniform is a command, this is a uniform worn by Jimmy Deal when he met George W. Bush. Shook hands with him in this uniform. He was a command sergeant of the Air Force. You'll notice, I don't have it on. I have a Navy cap that I have this, he gave me 2 of them. So this uniform, but he's deceased now, but this is his uniform. This fellow here is in the Coast Guard. And his mother dances here. Her name's Pat Rocks. I don't know if any of you know Pat. She dances here, and he's a lieutenant commander. He's a lieutenant commander, and I don't know anything about Mr. Gorman other than this is a 1964 Class A uniform. This fellow here I knew, George Johnson will be here in the morning. He eats breakfast with us. He's an ex-Navy captain. I went to sea with him a time or two. He's a pretty good fellow to go to sea with because he took a lot. He knew how to take advice from Master Chiefs in the Navy. So he let the Master Chiefs run the ship, and he just drew all the pay. Jesse, Mr. Campbell, isn't that correct? I said Mr. Johnson here was a good captain. He had enough sense to let all the Master Chiefs run the ship, and he sat back and drew the big pay. I wasn't joking. George's a good man. This Ed Hall was a major in Vietnam. He was doing some work with helicopters. Different things in here that, I've been in every one of these ports except one. I wasn't ever in Cairns. But we had a drum and bugle corps here for from 1930 on through up until 1964, I believe. And in 1950, they were going to the National Drum and Bugle Corps playoffs in Philadelphia, and they wanted to have some girls from Spartanburg to represent them as majorettes. So they went and got these 3 girls. Well, I knew this girl here. This was the head majorette at Spartan High, Aunt Salute, and I knew the girl here, but I didn't know the girl in the middle. Anyway, she marched in this uniform with the bottom was this color, but something happened to it. And she won this medal in Philadelphia in 1949 with our Drum and Bugle Corps. I met her in 1952. I cut in on her and a friend of mine dancing on the boardwalk at Myrtle Beach, and we've been married ever since. So, but this, our grandchildren ruined the little dress, but it was this color. You know, and you can't buy satin in South Carolina. I think you can get it in China, but you can't buy it here. This was anybody knew Lawyer Brown, Bobby Brown? This was his uniform. He was known as Reb. His call sign was Reb. I told him, I said, boy, I've always had a place in my heart for them Navy pilots because they land on them ships. He said, well, guess what? I said, what did he say? I never landed on a ship. He flew the Catalinas that landed on water. What is it, Jerry?
I want to share one thing before we get by. This display of the American flag here.
Yes, go ahead.
This display was made by my sister. She made the eagle out of linoleum rug that she had taken up. The draperies where it used to be a drapery in one of her houses. She made everything there by hand except the flag. The eye on the eagle is a washer out of a spigot. I mean, she could make anything. She had that set up on her front porch to honor the troops. And it's been a number of years ago. Her husband stayed in the Air Force 21 years. I was attached to the Navy for 27 years. She has a son that was with the, what was it, the group that got the Saint out of the hole over there?
SEAL Team 6.
The top secret service department. He graduated from Wofford. And she has another son that's also a retired chief petty officer out of the Navy. And she did that to honor all of us on the 4th of July. And it stood in front of her house, and her house is located, if you know anything about Packlet Mills, where the preachers' houses are. It was the house next door to the preacher's houses. This stood up in front of her house on the porch.
It was here for many, many years downstairs.
Oh yeah, I had to take a window completely out of the building to get that flag in here.
Well, you ain't got no idea what we had to do to get it up here. Anyway, that's kind of how it is, and there's a lot of things here that I don't talk about. There's sabers, World War I sabers, and rifles. I will tell you about this fella here. I don't know if anybody knows him or not, but he died just 2 years ago. His name was Francis Edward Gibbs. His wife was up here and she said, I want my husband's uniform on one of these mannequins. I said, well, Ms. Gibbs, we've sold these rifles right here for hang-ups. This one back here, I'm sorry. For $125, the Army gave us about 20 of them, and that's how we earn money you can't fire them, but they could hang on the wall. But that's how we hadn't earned enough money to buy those mannequins. I said, they're about $150 a piece. She said, I don't care. So I'll send you the money. She sent me that uniform, minus the shoes, minus this, and I had it cleaned, and I bought the mannequin, and I worked on this thing for 3 or 4 days, getting this little bitty uniform on this 6-foot mannequin. Finally got it on, and she come up here, she said, oh, that's not his uniform. I said, why is that not his uniform? That's the one you sent me. She said, oh, it had tigers and lions and things on it. I said, oh, Ms. Gibbs, are you referring to this? Oh, yeah, I guess that is it. I said, and this right here?
I had one just like it.
And she said, yes, I guess that's his. I said, okay. I didn't want to bust her bubble and tell her that was That was his,
On the cuffs, yeah.
that was his beer drinking jacket, you know, I didn't want to tell her that. This is what they call a Navy cruise jacket. Guy went to, he was on the Cascade, and he was in France and Turkey and Greece. In 1974, we were there in 1954, wasn't we? I think so. This Nancy Walsh, I've mentioned her a time or two. She's one of our past commanders here, the only female commander we've ever had. That's her and her husband. And that's a true Christie here. And so is this one. Unfortunately, it got a little bit ragged, and one of the guys trimmed it off to make it look nicer. I wish he'd have left it alone, because that devalued it quite a bit. One of our dance groups, and I told y'all that we had dance groups here that come in and have, on Saturday night, they have ballroom dancing downstairs. And so one of the guys called me and said, Jim, I was up in my attic and I have a pith helmet. Do you want it? No, I don't want it. I didn't know what he was talking about. This is known as a pith helmet. It's a German Afrika Korps World War II Afrika Korps helmet, or sun protector is what it is. And it's known as a pith, P-I-T-H, I guess is the way but I misunderstood him and I didn't want it. Until I found out later what it was.
You being a sailor, you would.
I wouldn't know. I know when the wind's blowing in my face what not to do, I'll tell you that. We've got a helmet here, and I don't understand, we are missing a helmet. Oh no, it's out there on the door. But this is what, let this young lady come up here just a minute. You. And this is, when you see these guys running around with these things on their head, it's kind of heavy.
That's kind of heavy.
And then when they put that other 1.5 pounds on there with the night vision, it is heavy.
Wow.
And this was World War II bucket. And they used the same one in Vietnam. It had a liner, and you could pull it off a little easier. And this one won't come out of here. And so you never wear it that way. I guarantee you, even though it's heavy, when artillery is firing, you try to get everything that you got under there. I mean, if you could get every bit of you up in there, you can get me there. The World War I soldiers wore a little helmet like this. I guess it was for rain. I don't know, maybe it could help them somewhat with artillery, bursting and things, but not much. This is an East German pilot's headgear. We got the headgear from the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force in World War II. Just all kind of stuff that goes on here. We even got a Navy piece of headgear here. Ralph Prince. Anybody know Ralph Prince? He was chief of police here for a number of years, wasn't he?
Yeah. Ralph Prince.
Ralph Prince.
Yeah, he was a police here for a number of years, a great, outstanding baseball player.
That's right. This was picked up on the Guadalcanal. This was a platoon water bottle. Now, it's got some Japanese on it. And if anybody reads Japanese, you're welcome to tell me what that says. I can't read it. But that was brought here. A lot of this stuff has been brought here over the years from different people having them. And what happens is somebody dies, and you go to clean out a house, and they don't want this stuff. It doesn't mean anything to some people. And so a lot of it gets thrown away down through the years. Basically, that's the tour. We had a terrible time finding a uniform from World War I that would fit these 6-foot mannequins. We were able to find it in this uniform here. This guy was 5'9". But his name was Clarence H. Crow. Anybody know Clarence? Service number? He's from Spartanburg. Clarence H. Crow. There's a little thing here that's not quite ethical, not new. He was not in the, had he been an observer corps, he would have wore those boots. But he was not. He was in the infantry, and consequently he wore leggings, like so. That's the only thing that's not, the leggings came with the uniform, the boots didn't. But the same uniform worn in the Air Force, in the Army Air Corps, if you were in observation or whatever, they wore those type of boots. Now I'll say this. Okay. There's some things here that I didn't talk about. 980 artillery shells. And things like that. It's just something to learn about. You don't want to run into one of them. You don't want to step on one of them. I'll tell you that. Now I'll ask you one more question. How many people can tell me what this is? What is this? Why would you have this? Now I will tell you right now, it will not stop a bullet. That don't mean that you got armor feet. But what did we do in Vietnam? Our soldiers stayed on the trails. The Vietnamese stayed in the woods or in the cover. But we walked the trails. So what they would do is dig a pit along here, maybe that deep, and put bamboo shoots in it, sharpen them to a point, stick them in cow dung. Everybody know what that is, don't you? And then put it in the ground. Well, when you step on it, you become a casualty. It takes 2 people to get you back to wherever you go. So you really, out of a platoon of 8 men, you really deactivate it. So they started issuing these to all the soldiers and to go in the boots. And I'm going to tell you something, it wasn't something that a soldier threw away either, he wore them. Now this, we did this for a reason. You want to see this? You go in any museum and they say, no, don't touch nothing. Well, this is for kids here. And we allow them to touch it and blow them and do everything else. There's all kind of stuff in there that they like to see. Let me mention one thing here. We got a lady that called and said, I've got a pistol that my husband's dead, and I want to give it to the museum, this pistol. I said, okay. He went and got it. He come back, and this is what he had. This pistol, that she called a pistol, happens to be an 1873 trapdoor, the first breech loader that was issued to the U.S. Army. Guess who carried this kind of weapon? Custer. The cavalry carried this weapon. A little bit shorter. They had it cut off the saddle gun. But this weapon here first came out with a brass cartridge. But as soon as they fired 2 or 3 of them and the barrel got hot, it would expand and they couldn't get them out. Now, by the way, at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the problem there was the Indians had the Henry repeater. And I think the saying was you load it on Sunday and fire it all week, something like that. This is a pistol that the little lady gave us. It's worth probably, well, 1873, it's worth quite a bit. Well, this one was valued at $1,800. But this is called a Springfield model trapdoor. Now, there's another thing in here that's kind of interesting. Say America won World War II. Now, there was a lot of Frenchmen fighting and a lot of other people fighting, but this is the weapon that won World War II. This is the Garand M1 rifle. It fired 8 rounds. All gas operated, you just pull the trigger, pat, 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 and it made a wonderful weapon. The adversary was using a weapon, he had to jerk it back, which was the Mauser was a highly recommended weapon, but it was nothing compared to this. And then if you became an officer or a tanker or something like that and you needed a weapon, this is the same weapon on a 30, this is a carbine. Much lighter, much smaller. Officers didn't like to carry heavy things. But now, if anybody's gonna come at me with one of these things, I don't want them coming at me. Feel that blade. That blade is fairly sharp. And he can take a chunk out of it and cut your head off there. This is an old Navy cutlass, by the way. And I'd rather you shoot me than hit me with that. And it's been a pleasure to tell you all that stuff, because a lot of it was made up along the way.